right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Building a Community of Practice with Emotional CPR session of the National Association of Peer Supporters Conference. We are so glad that you are here. My name is Tim Saubers and my pronouns are he, him, his. I am a board member of N.A.P.S. and I work for the Peer Recovery Center of Excellence with a focus on workforce development. For those of you who may be listening to this session, I am a Latino man. I have black hair and black glasses. I'm sitting in front of some cabinets and appliances, and I'm wearing a sweater. Oh, you can't see it, but it has an owl on it, like just off screen. So we do have closed captions enabled during this event. And if you'd like to use those, please click on the CC box in your Zoom toolbar. It's down at the bottom to find the option to enable captions individually. We're asking that during this presentation, attendees utilize the chat box to network, comment on the session, and interact. If you could please utilize the Q&A box feature to ask questions. We want to make sure that we have the ability to see all of the questions asked. So if you could just make sure that you're using that Q&A box instead of the chat box for questions, we would really appreciate it. Also want to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors, without whom this conference would not be possible. So wanted to extend a huge thank you in particular to our full conference sponsor, Marigold Health. Please make sure to visit the virtual exhibit hall, which you can find on our conference page under the sponsors tab. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lynn McLaughlin and Karen Iverson Riggers to the stage. I've worked with them for a couple of years and I'm excited to be in this space with them. I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Tim. That was lots and lots of information. I want to say happy Global Peer Supporter Day. Just realized that that is today and want to thank all of you for the work that you do. As a peer supporter myself, there is so much healing and support that we do as peer supporters, and recognizing that is an important piece of what we do. So my name is Lynn McLaughlin. I'm a certified peer specialist and trainer for the state of Wisconsin, also an eCPR or emotional CPR trainer. My pronouns are she, her. My physical description is an older white woman. I have glasses and shoulder length brown hair. My top is floral color. It's very busy print, fall colors, and behind me is a bookcase. And I'm going to let my co-facilitator and friend Karen introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Iverson Riggers. My pronouns are she, her. I'm thrilled to be coming to you from Appleton, Wisconsin, which occupies the land of the Menominee tribe. And really honored to be here with all of you. I'm a mother and writer, storyteller, advocate, activist, eCPR trainer, certified peer specialist. Just depends on the day what you ask me. I present as a 40-something white female. I've got short blondish brown hair. I'm wearing glasses. I'm wearing a green shirt today with kind of a really nice stitching, colorful stitching on it. And back behind me is a door. We're so glad to be with all of you today. We are so excited to talk with you about community of practice. When we were putting this together, there's so much we want to share with you. So this is going to be like just a power hour of some material, but I always feel like it's important in a workshop to give us space to work together as well. And so we're going to get a time for you to work some of your ideas as well.
So we are going to start with a video that was created by the National Empowerment Center. They are the holders of emotional CPR. eCPR was created by a diverse group of people with lived experience with crisis. And it does a beautiful job of just an overview of what emotional CPR is. And you will find incredible alignment with what we do as peer support people.
Though in a crowd, I often feel alone. The world is changing fast, and my voice seems insignificant. To protect myself from traumas of loneliness and helplessness, I've become comfortably numb. These are not a few individuals' problems. Our lives are inundated by the impact of advertising messages, constant flow of information, the reality of cultural and economic inequality, broken public systems, the pressure to compare, to compete, to survive. Most of us become disconnected and alienated from our feelings, trapped in our heads. But where does help come from? We can support each other through emotional CPR. Emotional CPR, or eCPR, is a public health education program designed to teach people to assist one another through an emotional crisis. eCPR is based on universal principles shared by a number of specific support approaches: trauma-informed care, counseling after disasters, peer support, emotional intelligence, suicide prevention, and cultural attunement. eCPR was developed as a broad-based approach to address the many sources of trauma by a cadre of leaders from across the United States who have learned how to recover and grow through our own crises. eCPR includes 3 simple steps. C is for connect, P for empower, and R for revitalize. The crisis that we're facing is a crisis of disconnection. That's what we really try to teach in emotional CPR, is how people can be authentic, how they can be themselves. And it's in you. We wouldn't have developed as babies if we weren't able to relate in some way, because our very existence depends on that connection.
See these handcuffs? Before eCPR, I was handcuffed to my past and I was stuck in my emotions. And I realized that once I connected with myself first, then I was able to connect with everybody else, knowing what they feel like and what they need, and to hear what they're not saying and to see what they're not showing. Those things make my blood flow, gives me reason for living and purpose.
It changed my life, honestly. After that training, I saw everything differently. We have it all inside each other. To be open with people, to share our emotions. When we talk to people, we're thinking about what to say next. We're thinking about the correct thing to say, but really we're not listening to what they're saying. All they want is for someone to listen. Just to actually be there with that person, they can feel that you actually care about what's going on in their life. It makes me feel like I'm not alone and that people understand how I feel, and that's pretty much the best feeling in the world, really.
eCPR teaches us to be present and respectfully listen with our eyes, our ears, and our heart, which overcomes isolation. eCPR teaches us how to create new life through emotional dialogue. eCPR training is ideal for healthcare workers, police, first responders, teachers, parents. Indeed, everyone has the power to heal themselves and our communities. Become an eCPR practitioner by contacting the National Empowerment Center today.
Thank you, Karen. So that gives kind of a broad overview. We're going to get into it a little bit more, what emotional CPR is. And as I mentioned when I was introducing the video, the parallels between eCPR and peer support they're so similar. So I think you're going to hear some very common language as we walk through what emotional CPR is. So the actual definition of emotional CPR is a community education program which prepares people to assist another person experiencing an emotional crisis. And I think it's really valuable to pull some words out of the definition to help deepen the understanding of what that actually means. The words that I like to pull out, community is one of the first ones. Much like peer support, we heal together. We heal in community with one another. There is a depth of healing that happens when we are with others who can hold space for us unconditionally and non-judgmentally and share where we're authentically at. The other word I like to pull out is to assist. Please note that it does not say to fix. It doesn't say to assess. It doesn't say to advise. It doesn't say to recommend. It, again, holds a lot of the values and framework of peer support in that we are there to hold space for another person to find their answers and what would be helpful for them. And then the last word I like to pull out of the definition is the word crisis. And one of the frameworks of eCPR is the recognition that crisis is universal. All human beings experience it at some time during their lives. With the unpredictability of life, anytime something changes significantly, it can bring about crisis. The thing that's really important, and I think especially as we look at the last year and all of the things that have come about with COVID, all of the things that have happened in 2020 that have been abrupt changes in the way that we integrate and navigate life, could result in crisis. So it's universal, it's a human experience. The other thing that's really important to note about crisis is it's very subjective, and what could create crisis in one person may not in another. So it's really, really important that we allow for it to be self-defined. The person that we are with in a supportive relationship in a mutual way, and allowing them to define what their reality is and what that means to them to share meaning of their experiences. So there are 3 phases to eCPR. Again, you're going to find some common alignment here. The C in eCPR, so E stands for emotion. The C stands for connection. Connection is the cornerstone of peer work. So you understand the importance of connecting with the people that we're supporting. We like to say in eCPR that connection is prevention. Having people that we can be with and be seen with and be heard with authentically is where that healing can happen. The P in eCPR stands for empower. We often have a conversation around, is it possible to empower another person? And I think the answer we've come up with is we don't empower them, but we create the space and the opportunity for people to step into their power. I also believe that when we are holding that space of being seen and heard, feeling the value of that can create empowerment for individuals. And then lastly, the R is for revitalize. And that is a place where it feels like it's possible to re-engage with life. And sometimes it can be as simple as taking a breath, and other times it's a much bigger step back into life, again totally defined by the people that we're supporting. When we look at the levels of emotional CPR, when it was originally created, it was very much one-on-one. It was one person supporting a person in emotional crisis. As eCPR continued to expand, there was the recognition that CPR was possible and that it could be done in a group setting. It can also be done in a community setting, community CPR, which we're going to talk about a little bit later as far as what we're doing in the Fox Valley area of Wisconsin and building capacity of people trained in eCPR so that supportive structure continues to grow and expand to meet the ongoing and ever-growing need for support with people. The last one is CPR, and I think as Karen and I have done these trainings within our community since May of 2019, and we recognized at the beginning of the pandemic how important it was to go within and practice eCPR, so that opportunity to connect with what we were feeling in the moment and recognizing our comfortability is the word I usually use, which just, I don't know why it makes me giggle, but it does. But comfortability with our own emotions and the emotions of others, and what happens within us in the realm of all those emotions. How do we respond to people who are angry? How comfortable are we expressing our own anger and looking at all of those pieces? Another really important component of CPR is the extension of compassion and empathy to ourselves when we're going through it. There is being able to extend empathy when we are making mistakes or when we're taking new risks, and recognizing our humanity and embracing it, and again, extending compassion, taking time to be with ourselves. I think that's been one of the most beautiful outcomes of the pandemic, is the slowing down where we are able to really spend time with ourselves and do some of that inner work, which is so powerful.
I think the piece I want to lift up about CPR that has been really powerful for me is there's a lot of talk about self-care, right? And taking care of ourselves. And I like to lift up to say a lot of times when people say self-care, it's like, go away and go take care of yourself, like go have a bubble bath and fix the thing, right? And CPR is very much about connection, and that might be connection with yourself, or it might be connection with someone else, to really provide care and compassion for yourself.
So the foundations of eCPR, I mentioned in the beginning when we were looking at the video, eCPR was created by a really diverse group of people throughout the United States that have experienced crisis and were consciously aware of what was helpful and what wasn't. And as they were creating the framework, they looked at a bunch of other frameworks that helped create the foundation. Values of a healthy community, cultural empathy and intersectionality, and really looking deeply at how that shows up and how we can be supportive of people from other cultures, pulling in the wisdom and knowledge of people from marginalized communities and lifting up the voice of BIPOC communities. So really doing work around culture, pulling in trauma-informed approaches as far as the recognition. Again, oftentimes I will use the words crisis and trauma interchangeably, the nature of it being subjective and universal, pulling in components of recovery, mutuality, and mutual aid, recognizing the foundation of conventional help and how that differs from ECPR support, and looking at both of those pieces, the features of dialogue. And I think one of my favorite pieces of ECPR is using ECPR for suicide prevention and holding that space, which is very, very similar to alternatives to suicide, to be with someone who's experiencing suicidal thoughts and feelings, and utilizing the framework of ECPR. So when Karen and I present ECPR, we always go through these slides and we're like, this is my favorite part. So this is my favorite part. I'm certain of it. I have grown to love the word practice. It helps me embrace myself as a human being, a fallible human being, one who makes mistakes, one who doesn't have all the answers, one who can be socially awkward, one who can embrace the whole learning process. So when we talk about ECPR as a framework and we look at connection, prevention, or empowerment and revitalization, it takes practice. We don't go from standing next to a bike to riding a bike. There's this process of learning that we go through that literally happens from the day we take our first breath until we are done on this earth plane. And embracing that process of ever learning is all part of ECPR. It's looking at the way that, again, we look inward and outward and approaching it with childlike wonder and curiosity, recognizing when there's judgment around things. I think that's been another huge piece of my practice, is recognizing my biases, recognizing my judgments, and being able to step back. And then also have self-compassion when that happens, rather than going, Lynn, you know better than that. Being able to go, that was an opportunity for learning, and extending self-compassion. I love that ECPR embraces mistake making and risk taking, that you can practice new ways of supporting people, that you can practice new ways of connecting within yourself. And there is no right or wrong. There are no black or white ways of thinking, that it's all okay, and there's opportunity for learning in all of it, which is really powerful.
It reminds me of the piece around in ECPR. We also talk quite a bit about both and versus either or. And I ran into a friend last night and I had said both and she's like, oh yeah, you're the both and person. Thank you for that. About thinking about how we in practice can hold space for multiple things, multiple emotions at once, right? Like multiple pieces that are going on in our life. So yeah, love the practice piece. Love the practice piece.
Yes.
Please, if you have any questions as we go along, pop them in the Q&A. We'll grab them all at the end, as we might address your question as we go along. But we love engagement and questions, and popping in the chat, please do, and let us know what you're thinking about or what is impacting you. So as we started to build this community of ECPR, as we were training folks, people were like, this is not enough. Like these couple days together is not enough time. Like these are my people. I want to be with my people. And because ECPR is a practice, we talk about it at the beginning and say, like, this framework is really pretty simple on the face of it, right? Which is just 3 letters: connect, empower, revitalize. And then you start unpacking it. And I'm sure many of you have had this experience, right? Of how it's not help if it's not helpful. And so when we start to step back and think about all the things we want to do differently in supporting folks who are seeking support, it becomes really involved. It becomes a shift in thinking, and it's difficult. And so when we started to say this is a practice, right? This is not like read this manual and you know how to do this. This isn't a formula. This isn't a, here's your assessment and you mark off X, Y, and Z, and here's what you do next. That's not what this framework is. And so that is really new for some folks, and also really refreshing, and also challenging. And so we wanted to figure out a way to bring folks together. And we've done that through a community of practice. So what is a community of practice? According to Etienne Wegner, it's a group of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. And Etienne and Beverly Wegner Trainer are really kind of the people in terms of community of practice and best practices for community of practice, defining what it is, how to create them. There's lots of really, really great resources. But when we look at this definition, what we're thinking about is folks coming together for a common purpose and folks who want to learn how to do something better together. So the key elements to a community of practice, and I want all of you to pay very close attention because this is going to be part of our work together later. First is what's called the domain. And what that is folks coming together based on a shared learning need, meaning that there's been something that's identified that folks want to dig into deeper, want to unpack, have a need. It might be related career-wise, it could be personal, it could be professional, but have a shared learning need, right? All of us here, sitting here, have benefited from peer support. So we certainly understand what that looks like to have a shared learning need. So that's the first piece, is the domain. The second piece is community. And what that's defined as collective learning that becomes a bond among them over time. A community of practice, when we think about the elements, it's not like a facilitated group, like somebody's the expert and is teaching the rest of the group. It's folks learning together. It's very much a collective, collaborative structure. And so what that means is that the community all holds responsibility for learning with one another. And the practice, here's that word again, right? This is a practice. This means that interactions produce resources that affect their practice. And those resources might be physical resources. Some communities of practice co-create things together. They might create new learning. They might create documents. They might create like physical resources, or they might co-create knowledge together. That might be a resource that is produced. And then those resources that are produced, the learning that happens, then affects what they do moving forward and affects their continued learning. So these 3 key elements, domain, community, and practice, kind of define what a community of practice looks like and how it's different than like an interest group or a support group or a other types of, or a workshop or a conference. A community of practice is something that comes together for collective shared learning. I really love this. And we're going to talk a little bit about what our community practice community of practice looks like and what we've learned and seen. And I think we are very much seeing where we are in this life cycle of communities of practice. So the first piece is inquire. And that's the piece I talked about at the beginning, which we had all these folks who came through ECPR, loved it, and said, we want more and we want to stay connected. And so the inquire piece is really thinking about who is your audience, who's your community, and are they even interested in gathering together in this collective way for co-learning? So that's the inquire stage, when we're just kind of like, is this something that's relevant? Is this something that there's interest for, kind of gauging that piece. The next piece is design. And that's really much more of the kind of nuts and bolts sort of thing. Like, when might we meet? Where are we going to meet? What are our communities of practice going to look like? What's the timing? What's the expectation? So kind of designing what that community of practice is going to look like, along with some of the purpose behind it. So in that previous slide, we had those 3 elements. And one of those purposes is co-creating resources together, which might be knowledge. And so it might be that there's some definition of what do we want to co-create together. And it might be physical products, or it might be that shared learning and sharing of knowledge and experiences. And then you prototype, right? Which, if any of you are familiar with entrepreneurial or business cycles, right, we've got to test it. We have to see if it works. And what I love about communities of practice is they are very much innovative. They're very thoughtful, but they're pretty innovative in terms of being able to try different things. Sometimes I think I've been parts of different kinds of support groups, and we get very stuck in the structure of the group, or we get very stuck in the, like, this is the way it's always been done, and so we have to continue to do it this way, even if it's not making much sense to new folks that are coming in. The prototype phase gives some chance to kind of test the waters a little bit and see what might work. Launch is when you really start into the work of that community of practice and the actual gathering of people together, and the pieces around just the actual doing of the community of practice. Grow is thinking about how you might invite others into your community. And grow also has some elements of being thoughtful about what's working and not working. And right now, this is definitely where we are in our community of practice, is kind of reevaluating what's working for folks and what's not working, right? And this might be where you're looking at how many people are attending. Are people attending regularly or just dropping in? Are they dropping in and not coming back? And why? Right? So when you're thinking about grow, it's not necessarily growing in numbers. Maybe that might be your growth goal, but grow could also mean the work that you're doing together. What kind of resources are we co-creating together? What kind of knowledge are we trying to gain or learn? That could look like grow as well. And then sustain. And this is this care and feeding of this community of practice, which is thinking about what's working well, what's not working well, how do we sustain this learning? And this also could be a phase where you say, like, this community of practice has done its work. So unlike ongoing groups, many times communities of practice have a defined scope and a defined period of time, and that's okay. Right? Or a defined period of time of what it looks like. And then it innovates and changes based on the community and based on the collective needs and wants of the folks who are engaging in the community of practice. So Lynn, I'll let you chime in here too. We started a community of practice for ECPR. As far as we know, we were the first community of practice for ECPR, I think. Question mark. I see Lynn nodding. Yes, we are the first community of practice for ECPR that started, and then we're the longest running community of practice now. Others have started as well. And so when we started, we were like, we don't really know what we're going to do, but people want to get together. And so we just really started by bringing folks together regularly over a lunch hour where people could talk about their experiences. Sometimes people would bring in resources to share with one another. And over time, we found like, oh, we think we want to kind of focus the topic a little bit. And people were asking for something a little different as well. And so we started then doing 2 offerings of community of practice. So one is a community of practice. In ECPR, we have 6 intentions, which help kind of guide the framework. And so we just rotate those 6 intentions with our community of practice. And so it might be the intention we're focusing on this time is the healer is within. And so in that community of practice, folks will talk about what that means to them. They'll talk about what experiences they've had. They'll talk about the challenges that come up. They'll talk about, maybe real experiences that have happened. And then a lot of times there's kind of collective sharing around, wow, that's really interesting. That's what I would have done. Or have you thought about X? Or, and it might be that me CPR focus, right? Thinking about connecting with ourselves. And it might be the intentions of what it looks like to connect with someone else. And then we have a second community of practice, which is focused on mindfulness. So one of our ECPR practitioner trainers is a yoga teacher and mindfulness teacher. And folks are really finding value in taking that time and space. So much of ECPR is about being fully present and is about being aware of what's present for us. And so sometimes the ECPR practice calls us to a bigger and greater awareness of what's going on with us. What else do you want to add, Lynn?
Really only one thing that you did beautifully in capturing what it looks like. I think one of my favorite pieces about the community of practice is, and I think you will find this in peer support work as well, is there becomes this blurring of personal or professional, and you start to recognize that the learning that's happening impacts so many different areas of your life. So the community of practice is not like how you use ECPR to support others. It's just this beautiful flow of sharing of knowledge in all facets of life and in all ways that we hold being human. And that's one of my favorite parts.
we say that like, this is my favorite. No, this is my favorite. So some learning has come from offering these communities of practice. One is that there are some folks who want to engage really regularly, and there are some folks who drop in every once in a while. Sometimes it just has to do with the schedule of their lives. And so it felt important to us. There are other communities of practice that will really sequence work, meaning that there's a commitment to coming to every community of practice for folks that join that community of practice. Ours looks a little different in that we wanted to make it as accessible as possible. And so part of that was saying these offerings are drop-in. You don't need to register ahead of time. You just show up when you are available and able. One of the things that we're kind of in right now in the dynamic, we have, as we have done these trainings now for almost 2.5 years, we have a huge group of folks who have come through either we do introductory ECPR workshops or the full 12-hour ECPR certification. And we're noticing that not everyone is engaging in the communities of practice. And so we have some work to do to figure out what it is that people might want and need after they go through these trainings. And that could look really different for folks. So I think we're in a period now where we're in the grow period of our communities of practice. meaning that it's time to grow and change potentially what we're doing, or maybe not, as we talk to people, because we also have a pretty regular group of folks that attend, that are pretty dedicated to it as well. So it's, I think we'll have some challenge in terms of balancing those needs and thinking about what we offer. The other piece that I think is important to think about with communities of practice is just the structure of it. So for us, we have someone who is a designated, we call them a facilitator, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're responsible for the group, if that makes sense. That it's a much more collective, collaborative structure. I would say that it's important to figure out, we have as a group with ECPR, we don't really necessarily need to create a really kind of big like group guidelines or community agreement, because all of us are coming together under the umbrella of ECPR, which holds these intentions and a framework of how you connect with other people. So that's already inherent in our community of practice. But I think it's something that you definitely want to be thinking about if you are forming a community of practice, of what that community agreement looks like. What are we agreeing to hold together when we come together in this time and space? What are we agreeing is going to be kind of the resource or the learning that we want to embark on together? That's very much of a collective process versus a hierarchical process.
I think it's important to recognize too, so we started training in 2019. So we went through we're going to meet in person and then shifting to virtual. And I think that's one of the pieces of the grow piece that we're looking for a lot of input on, is, are people wanting to go back to in-person? Do they want to continue the virtual? There's some people that adamantly will only do Zoom, and there's some that only do in-person. So how do we figure all those pieces out as well? So I think there's so many different ways to make things happen.
I think probably one of the greatest areas of challenge that we continue to like be accountability buddies about on the community of practice is we're both used to leading and facilitating groups. And so people know that about us. And so they're like, oh, you're the leader facilitator. And we're like, no. Like, we're here as part of the community of practice too. Like we want to be here as a participant. And so that's been a challenge, I think, on both sides of us not stepping into that role and also kind of talking with participants to say, like, this is our role here. That makes sense.
And it is so freeing to be able to say, you know what, I'm here because I'm a practitioner and I need support too. And that is one of the most beautiful feelings ever, to name it and show up that way and have others honor that. So thank you for naming that, Karen. Absolutely. And it's beautiful.
It is. And the piece around that facilitating ECPR has been one of the most powerful experiences for me. I've facilitated a lot of different kinds of trainings and workshops, and the core of folks that we've built who are in our kind of trainer pool in our community, it's really powerful because all of us get to show up as we are. And so that becomes really powerful to do that. But it also becomes really challenging, right? Because we're like being asked to show up as you are in all of your glory and challenge. For sure. So we've had a chance to share with you about community of practice, but you came to this session because you're interested in community of practice. So we are going to give you about 5 minutes to think about an area in your life. And maybe it's personal, maybe it's professional, maybe it's, I feel like there should be a word that combines those two, because I think for almost all of us sitting around this workshop, right, the personal and professional are totally interwoven right here. So personal, personal, I don't know. But to think to think about an area in your life where you would like a community of practice. Where do you want to find that environment of community, a community of learning? And so what is the domain? So if you remember, the domain are the members who come together based on a shared learning need. So it's a group of folks who have a shared learning need. The community, and that is the concept around what's the collective learning that bonds you together. And then the practice, what is the resource that you would like to come out of your community of practice? So we are going to give you 5 minutes, all right, to work that out. Welcome to the workshop. See you in 5 minutes. Got about 1 more minute, friends. All right, everyone. So I am going to encourage you to share in the chat box a little bit about your community of practice. Maybe what's the domain, what's the community, what's the practice? I know all of you are doing amazing things. And so this is a chance for us to learn from one another as well. So I'm just going to give all of you a minute to pop into the chat box if you'd like to share what community of practice you hope to start. Thank you, Renee, for jumping in. This is wonderfully timely for me. I'm helping peers develop a community of practice around empathy. Beautiful. Civic tech community at Code for America. Love it. Well, I hope this has inspired maybe something for you to think about what kind of communities of practice you might think about. Oh, great. I see other folks popping in. Wonderful to share. Self-wellness, domain self-wellness and care. People who want to work on wellness and self-care, self-healing, meditation, yoga, eating healthy, positive thinking. Love it. Domain professional, community peers and community members, networking, collaboration. Yes. Yes, communities of practice can look so different based on what that shared learning need is. And so I think it's a really powerful, you saw some really great examples of folks who like, this is more of a personal piece, this is more of a professional piece. The word I just made up, which I saw somebody comment on, professional, yes, professional, yes. That's a word now, about how we might combine some of that into a community of practice. I think especially for the work that we do, right, which is combining both of those things, what that could look like. Beautiful. So I want to make sure that we get to questions that had popped into the Q&A. So Renee asks, what's the distinction between we CPR and community CPR in terms of numbers or of people or their relationship with each other? Lynn, do you want to grab that or do you want me to answer?
Yeah, I can do that. I don't know that there is. In my mind, the we CPR would be more small group related, and community would be community at large, or at least that's the way we've been applying it as far as the Fox Valley goes, and really community in all facets of communities. So we have business, we have nonprofit, we have government agencies, we have peers support people. It's really broadly community based. I hope that's helped.
I saw Dave popped in with a question. Thank you. That said, did you say if it isn't helping, it isn't helpful? Yes. Yeah. Variation of that is it's not help if it's not helpful. And that's actually something that was created by folks in our peer world. just talking about so often, right? We're like, you know, you need go seek help, right? And often the help that folks find is not helpful. In fact, many times it's harmful. And so the piece that continues to inspire me is thinking about systems change, or maybe even like building outside the system, right? The systems might be working exactly, think they're working exactly as they want to be. But that piece around it's not help if it's not helpful is thinking about, for each of us, when we have been in a place of struggle, what is it that would have provided support? What is it that would have provided healing? Yeah. Please feel free to pop in with other questions. We've got a few minutes remaining. We've got a couple more slides we want to grab as well. So one of the things we continue to do is to, when people ask, we answer, we're right there. So for some folks, it hasn't been accessible to do a 2-hour workshop or to even do a 12-hour training. And for other folks, they're like, I want more. And so Lynn and I have developed what's called ECPR Power Hours. They're open to anyone and everyone, whether or not you've taken ECPR or not. It just, in each hour, and it's an hour kind of over the lunch hour, we unpack one of the concepts, part of the framework around ECPR. So we've talked about grief. We have talked about connection as prevention. Our next one, which we're really excited about, is emotional reactions are normal. And we're going to be unpacking that and talking about that. So if you want to come geek out with us for a little while, for an hour, there's a link right here. Lynn put our contact information in the chat. Please feel free to email us if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, if you want more information. We would love to connect with you, hear what you're doing, and support you in any way that we can as well. So that is our ECPR Power Hour. Anything else you want to add, Lynn?
No.
No,
No, it's fabulous. I love it.
And with that, all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like 1 minute. It's almost 2 o'clock. So glad to have time together. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you all for all of the comments in the chat box as well. So great to hear from all of you. Thank you for the work that all of you do.
And thank you, Lynn and Karen. It seems like what you guys were sharing was really resonating. It was great to see so many people in the chat. I know I love hearing about ECPR any chance that I get. So I'm so appreciative to have had you two with us today. Thanks to everyone who came into this presentation. It is recorded. It will be up on our website, the N.A.P.S. website, once the conference is over. We have a 15-minute break now, and then the next set of breakout sessions begins in 15 minutes. So feel free to take a break and do what you need to do. We'll see you soon. And thank you so much once again, Lynn and Karen. We'll see everyone later.
Thank you.
Thank you.